So every Sunday you
Watch
taught
that class.
Oh,
And it was like that. Just, while you're washing my legs, tripped over. Yeah, get a little spongy. Yeah, yes.
Oh, you're welcome. I was gonna read it. Beautiful time.
Yeah, I think you'll find out.
A lot.
I'm not chill to get it, and I told people,
And I'm going on vacation, I'm going to all
you know, there's all the other stuff.
Yep.
This is a good one.
So what did you want to know? How much was it?
No, they're way low because
Yeah. There was one of the refrigerator that she didn't, nobody touched.
She's not.
Oh, you bring it again?
yes, I think you said it.
Yeah. Okay, I'll make sure I write that down, that you're claiming that it is, I would be claiming, because we're also in the innocence. We might be missing there, but we do all have to ask them. But, and then, oh wait, the invoice is on the invoice. Jane, did you say invoice is on the 19th in October? Okay, so maybe we'll make it on the 18th. Anyway, but I know we're gonna be missing at least one. Yeah, but actually, 2 people are gonna be coming. That's right, in Jan now. So that's gonna be 4 missing, but we're gonna be picking up 2. Well, these. So he's gonna, they don't. I know. No. He's gonna.
That'll work.
So to what degree? Some of them are, you're right. Just gonna have that.
There's, well, I'm trying to this course, for the clay courts and stuff, you're supposed to have true tennis court.
Well, she said she was
That's what that's, I have no idea. Listen, whatever type of athletics you're on.
I have to put them in their car.
Easier said than done. You have $6,000
Oh, he gave us homework.
I have sheets here if anybody wants them. One of those? Oh, thank you, sir.
You know, there's a lot of climbers there, I mean, then also you got like, yeah, and also, you know,
Good?
So I'm going to stand the thing that I'm supposed to do. Absolutely.
Are these lost and found anybody's?
There's very little.
Probably from line dancing, I bet.
You know, those line dancers cause a lot of trouble.
That's all, yeah.
Glad that's all we found. Last week we heard a little bit about home missions. We're going to start out today getting a little update on world missions. We called new missionaries to Africa this year. Part of my work as the chairman of the board for world missions is to is to help deploy and take care of these guys. I got to be there for their for our installation commissioning service. You'll see me make a cameo appearance in the background. But so our mission field in Central Africa is one of our oldest mission fields. That was one of the first places, other than Native American reservations in Arizona, where we started doing work among foreign language people, unless you considered the English-speaking people back when we were German. So in the Lutheran Church of Central Africa is a very large church. It's a very much a mature church. So we've been there since about 1950. So around 70 years, and this is one of the fields that has followed what we call it a plan for indigeneity, or that the idea is that we should be able to raise up inside of a church leaders who are coming from the culture and from the people that they might be an indigenous church, not necessarily a church that's just maintained by pastors from America. And so that is the case in our churches in Central Africa. They have their own seminaries that are filled with professors from their own culture and from their own mission field. And what we do now is with our missionaries that we're sending to Africa, think less like it was 50 years ago, where 50 years ago we say to a missionary, go to this part of Africa, share the gospel with these villages, and share the gospel with as many people as you can. Today what we're doing is we're sending missionaries whose job it is to train the teachers and trainers that are in the culture. So we're going to talk about these guys that are going as big theological educators, and let's take a look at it.
Serve on the One Africa team in Lusaka, Zambia. So we're getting to move there, and I'll be serving on their outreach committee, and that means I'll have the role of traveling around the continents, I guess, going from country to country and teaching people there how to teach their own people. So that's a major role, and then establishing new contacts and then training those contacts to spread God's word in their own area.
We have 4 kids. We have, our oldest is 14 and our youngest is 3. So a good spread. 3 girls and a boy. So we'll be taking the whole family over to Zambia and adjusting. And I feel like my job in the first year will be helping everybody adjust and emotionally figure out this new life that we'll be doing together. But there'll be one international school there in Lusaka, Zambia. There's a few choices. We're going to tour different schools and make a decision once we get there of which school they'll go to.
Big thing for me was thinking about my own gifts and what I enjoy doing, and world missions had a special place in my heart. I've always been interested in other places, other cultures, other peoples. So that was a big part of it. Also, teaching is something that I love to do, and here's a call where I could focus just primarily on that. So I was really excited about that opportunity. Also, as I looked at just the potential, humanly speaking anyway, right, of reaching people, and you think about this ministry and its potential to reach not just one community, not just one country, but an entire continent, and that's what the role is about. And teaching others to teach others, there's just an exponential opportunity there. And that's what's really excited me about it, and that was definitely a primary factor in taking the call.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about family and what this is going to be like for our kids, and just kind of asked a lot of questions surrounding that. And it's neat to know that there are many families that have grown up, many American families that have grown up on the mission field, and seeing some of those families and seeing how God's taking care of them. And just, yeah, there were a lot of worries through the process of like, what would this mean for us? But finally, I think it just kind of, they slowly faded away more and more. And we just said, we just have to trust God each step of the way, whether we're living here or there.
During the transition period here, especially prayers for patience and strength as we go through just a lot of changes and getting settled on the field. There's always unexpected things, and there's no way you can know everything about where you're going. And so there's going to be those those times where we feel like our world is shaking and, oh, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? But knowing that people are praying here for us, especially for those kinds of things, that's just really comforting to know. So
I think we're taking middle schoolers over, and I think that's not usually even moving middle schoolers in the United States is a very difficult thing. So I recognize that we're asking a lot of these kids to come with us and do this with us, and then at the same time, it's like, well, God is asking us to do this. So just prayers that they adjust well and that they find their new life and their new happiness. We don't look forward to it because we've never been there, but we just pray that we can just make a really nice, good life there. And I know God will bless us, but just we appreciate the prayers for that.
Yeah. Just so we remember Christ in it all, because he's the one that's going to get us through, and it's during the tough times that it's easiest to forget sometimes about that, and so that we would stay focused on Christ, and there would be ways for others to point us to that, and help us stay faithful that way.
It's interesting, sometimes they say that taking kids to a mission field, I've heard from some missionaries, they say it's easier if you just take your kids there when they're 1 or 2 years old, and they just grow up there. This is life in Africa. So the Foxons are taking kids there in middle school, which is going to be a special challenge for them. But any questions about the Foxons or our work that we're doing in Africa? Please join.
How long do they stay there?
How long do they stay? It's a permanent call.
Oh, it is a permanent?
Yeah, it's a permanent call. The first time they'll come back is they'll come home on furlough once every 2 years for a period of I think it's 2 months, but it's a permanent call. Yeah, that's that doesn't mean they have to stay there forever. It's kind of like calls in the United States. They're permanent calls. They don't have a shelf life. They can be there for their entire career. There's been we had one family that had multiple generations serve in Africa. Did I see another hand? No. Well, why don't we say a prayer for the Foxons? Lord Jesus, please be with the Foxon, our missionary family. The Foxons, our missionary family. Please, especially with their children, help them in this transition to Zambia, and then be with them, Lord, as they seek to share the gospel with a whole continent that so desperately needs to hear it. We ask it in your name. Amen. Okay, we are in the middle of 1 Samuel, and last time we let off with after 1 Samuel, I think it was chapter 18, where everybody falls in love with David, and then of course King Saul is jealous of David and starts wanting to kill him. Let's go to our timeline. David marries Michal after paying the bride price. Saul attempts to kill David a second time, sends men to kill him in his bed, and David takes off and flees. And then Jonathan helps David out and makes a confession that he believes that he knows that David will be the next king, and even King Saul knows that, said Jonathan. Then David remember you were reading, I think hopefully you read some of these chapters. If not, I'm going to summarize them. David goes to the priest at Nob and Ahimelech, and he says that I'm on a mission from King Saul, give me some bread. He's like, well, the only bread that there is here is the bread from the showbread, the sacred bread. And he gave David that bread for he and his men to eat, and then he also picked up the Goliath sword from the priest at Nob. Then David runs away from there, and then is Ronald here? Ronald, this is how we get to know that we no longer feel sorry for King Saul. Because King Saul hears that David came to Ahimelech and got himself some bread, and you know what Saul did? Killed them all. Slaughtered the entire group of the priests at Nob, including children and infants. He said, strike them down. He had Doeg the Edomite strike them down, kill them all dead. 85 men who wore the ephod, something like that. Only one guy escapes, that's Abiathar. He escapes and he makes his way to King David, or to David, the future king. And then David is living out in the wilderness. So this is his desperado stage. So he's out in the wilderness, on the run from King Saul. Remember, he had been commander of the royal bodyguard. He had been a leader of 1,000 men. He'd been a general, or whatever officer you'd call that. But then when Saul tried to kill him, David had to run. Well, David ended up gathering some men with him and had about 600 men living out in the wilderness, kind of on the run from King Saul. and kind of living a, well, not a vigilante life, maybe a desperado life is the better way to put it. And that's what we're going to pick up today in 1 Samuel chapter 25, I think it is. Get there.
And to make it clear, I'm not an apologist for Saul.
I just thought of you. When I read it, I'm like, oh, I got to say something wrong. Yeah, exactly. Again, twice it's worth noting that David had the chance to kill Saul, and he doesn't. The end of chapter 24 is another place where David spares Saul's life in the cave of Adullam. And Saul, even at the end, verse 16, at the end of verse 24, when David had finished saying this, Saul asked, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" And he wept aloud. "You are more righteous than I. You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. You just told me of all the good you did to me. The Lord delivered me into your hands, but you did not kill me. When a man finds his enemy, does he not let him get away unharmed? Or does he let him get away unharmed? May the Lord reward you well for the way you treated me today. I know that you will surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands." What a kind of a sad and tragic story. Go back to Ronald, right? Now, granted, he's still got the blood of the priests and Nom all over him, but what a sad story. I mean, he's like, yep, everybody even here it seems like Saul's, if he's not falling in love with David, he's admitting the obvious. You're a better person than I. You've got the Lord's favor. I know that the Lord's going to give you the kingdom. And then his only request, swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family. And so David gave his oath to Saul. Yeah, this transition of dynasties was going to be different than most dynastic transitions. Because, of course, the first thing you would do if you were David and you wanted to be the new king and you find Saul in the cave by himself, you kill him. Right? And then what do you do once you're done killing the king?
Kill everybody else.
Kill all of his kids. Yep, absolutely. Kill them all. But David was going to do this in a completely different way. It's interesting, when God makes you a promise, you don't have to be striving after things in a way like other people do. Here's a great example of David's faith. God promised him the kingdom. He said, I'm not going to lift up my hand against the Lord's anointed, Saul. God's going to do this in the way that he needs to do it. Yes?
Did Saul know ahead of time that David was, anointed by?
Do we know that he was anointed? It seems like everybody knew. When you look at 1 Samuel chapter 18, and then later on when David and Jonathan have this friendship, and Jonathan says, Jonathan is seeking to protect David's life, and then he says, even my father, I know that you're going to be king, and I'll be second in the kingdom behind you. Even my father knows this. This is a couple chapters earlier, so it seems as if probably after David killed Goliath and started his military exploits, I'm sure people talked, and maybe even his family finally recognized that there was something special in this kid. Remember when Samuel came? And Samuel said this. Yeah. But it seems like people knew.
Well, it makes you wonder why Saul knew that David was going to come after him. So Saul knew he would be king until he died. So why worry about the guy behind you?
Well, what? Let me not answer that. Why worry about the guy behind you?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't like he knew that God wouldn't have David kill him.
Yeah,
so
it seems like he could have picked up that knowledge after the second time that David spared his life. He seems to realize it, but I think this is probably a very telling thing about King Saul, where he knew the Spirit of the Lord had left him. He knew that the Spirit of the Lord was with David. It seems that he knew that David was anointed to be the next king of Israel, and still what was Saul trying to do? Kill David, even though God was clear about it. This is kind of a pattern with Saul. God can give clear instruction, and Saul takes it to mean what he wants it to mean, whether that's with any of the things that made God rip the kingdom away from him. The biggest reason was because he wasn't a person of faith. He wasn't someone that took God's words and received them and trusted in them. And here's a good example. He knew that God was going to make David king, and what is he trying to do? He's trying to kill David so that God can't have what God wants. Yeah. Gary.
This makes me think of the song of the day. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All who follow his precepts have good understanding. Well, Saul obviously no longer had any good understanding.
Yeah, it's interesting how the psalmist ties those two things together, right? If you don't have the fear of the Lord, well, you don't have wisdom. You don't have clear understanding. And you can see that to today with people that can be some of the smartest people on the planet. If they don't have faith, they really aren't understanding what's actually going on. They don't understand the reality of this world, no matter how brilliant they might be. Yeah.
So it's kind of like Satan here. Satan was told the same thing, pretty much, and he's going down swinging.
Absolutely. Yep. And now again, you're going to find out that Saul is cut off from any way to inquire of the Lord anymore, because he's killed the priests at Nob. The last one that escaped was Ahimelech, or Abiathar, and he goes over to David with the linen ephod. Samuel is dead and has been mourned, or we're about to read it. Samuel is dead. Saul's got no connection left to the Lord at all. He's all on his own. We'll see where that leads him. All right, let's take a look at 1 Samuel chapter 25. Now, Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him. Then they buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David moved down to the desert of Man. A certain man who had property there at Carmel was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband, a Calebite, was surly and mean in his dealings. While David was in the desert, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to them, "Go to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us out in the desert and the wilderness when they were in their desperado life, we did not mistreat them. And the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, and they will tell you. Therefore be favorable toward my young men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them.' When David's men arrived, they gave Nabal this message in David's name. Then they waited. Nabal answered David's servants, 'Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shears and give it to men coming from who knows where?' David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men, 'Put on your swords.' So they put on their swords, and David put on his. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies." All right. Let's take a few minutes. Remember to introduce yourself to the people that you're going to talk with. If you're talking with yourself, don't make an introduction. It'll look weird. You can talk about whatever you'd like, but here's some suggestions for you to think about. In 1 Samuel chapter 25, what significance do you see in that first verse? What strikes you of the descriptions? Evaluate David's response or request and Nabal's response. Ready, set, go. Let's take 5 minutes. Please. Pardon me?
Who wrote First and Second Samuel?
It's amazing how the writer of Samuel puts this on what Nabal means.
Correct.
It means fool. So his name is literally fool. Yeah. It's just
Like the license plate that says I'm guilty.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I agree though. That's the greatest thing.
So basically, he was treated, he wasn't going to share anything, even though he was like,
Without
so did he get killed?
Look again at verse 10. Where do Nabal's But he says that David has broken away from his master. Yeah, Nabal is Saul's man. So that's why he's like he's saying that David's a runaway servant. And that's why
So he's the enemy.
basically, I mean, this name means fool for a reason. Odds are Nabal probably knew who David was because, like David said, Nabal was rich enough to have shepherds.
under his supervision, and they were dealing with the sheep. And David knows how sheep work, so he was just chilling with the shepherds, and he heard about it. Yeah, he never mentioned Jethro with his
He's like word of mouth, everything, everyone. Talk about whether it has
my father's name is Dale. So Abi is in Hebrew, Abi is my father, and then Dale is his name. So my dad's name is Dale. David doesn't have a name for his name. David's a weird name. That's why I like names for the Bible. Besides David.
What did we talk about? Did anybody talk about any of these questions? Go ahead, Carolyn.
I want to know why everyone's answer
Carolyn wants to know why the answer to everyone's answer to a problem is pick up your sword and go kill people. I mean, the quick answer is because boy, isn't that quick and convenient, I suppose. But yeah, and in fact, if you look at a couple verses later, it's not just he picks up his sword. What's his plan? Look a couple verses. Or yeah, David. He well, I'll give you a little. Well, I'm going to hold that for a second because we're going to get into that in the second section. But yeah, why he picks up his sword.
But he described him as a Calebite. Is that the son of Caleb, like Joshua and Caleb?
Yeah, a Calebite would have, I believe that's the clan it's talking about. I don't believe that Calebites were particularly known as mean and surly. I think he was a Calebite, and he was mean and surly. So, not that all Calebites were mean and surly. You know.
Yeah. Well, wasn't his family tasked to kind of guard the wilderness between Israel and raiders and stuff, like after the conquest of Israel?
We know that Caleb went and Caleb took over the territory he was supposed to, expelled everyone out that he was supposed to. Not every tribe did. Not every tribe did. But I'd have to look that second question up.
I find it interesting that they describe everybody by their tribe.
Yeah, remember that's very much in this culture where who you belong to, whose you are, was a very important thing, more so than in our culture. Although 100 years ago in the farming communities of the South, Northwest, East, everybody knew everybody, and and you probably also knew that the Schmidts, they were all mean and surly, right? Yeah, the Schmidts were all mean and surly, and the whatever people, they were all, they didn't know how to plow or whatever else, But yeah, that very much so. You're going to be identified. It's a patronymic thing all right away. Like, who is this son of Jesse, right? That's your last name. A little bit. Well, you still see that in the Scandinavian countries, right? Sven Paulson or whatever. He's Paul's son.
Well,
Done.
they had farm names too in the Scandinavian, so you knew not only was he Paul's son, he was from this farm. So yes.
Awesome. Yeah. What do you think, Vicar?
It's interesting. Nabal means fool.
Yeah, Nabal means fool, although you'd have to say to yourself, and it's interestingly enough, his wife later on goes, his name is Fool and he acts like it. You gotta wonder what parent would name their kid Fool. So what are the options here, you think?
He acquired the name?
Acquired the name, it's a nickname, Jamie Grace?
Yeah, that was what I was gonna say, it was a nickname, or it's like a name given later.
Name given later, maybe, yep. Like Stonewall Jackson, he became Nabal. Although you look at his life, and why would they call him fool if he's wealthy, a man of standing? He's got thousands of animals. He's got lots of people working for him. It doesn't seem like he's foolish.
And he's got an intelligent wife.
He does have an intelligent wife. Maybe he's foolish compared to Abigail. Yeah. Another option is that Nabal it's a homophone. So it sounds the same, but it could mean something else. I can't think of a name in English that would be equivalent. But like the letters for Nabal could also, I should look this up again. Can also mean something like like lofty or royal or something like that. But then maybe she's making a play on words, like if I don't know. I can't think of an English name example that sounds, stupid. But, please.
Isn't it almost proverbial of wealthy fools? I mean, we got enough today in today's culture.
Well, for sure. It's interesting. I just want to go back to why would his parents name him Fool, right? Maybe it's something like, I had a friend who, it was interesting. He picked up the nickname Stu, and it was always, people would always say, where'd the nickname Stu come from? And depending who was telling the story, is either short for stupid or short for stud. So it could go either way. I think that might be a little bit what Nabal was like here. I don't know that his parents named him Fool, but in this instance, we're going to see him act in an entirely foolish way. How about the description of Abigail? Anybody talk about that?
For the Old Testament, she was named, and when you actually showed the importance and the fact that she was intelligent, and the fact that she was, he would have probably wanted a beautiful wife, but the fact that she was listed by name and is intelligent.
Yeah, she actually gets, I think, the longest discourse by any lady in the Old Testament here. That's interesting. And weirdly enough, the words that are used to describe Abigail are an awful lot like the words that were used to describe David, right? They're very much like that, yeah. All right, how about, what else did you guys talk about? Did you talk about the requests or response? Or what other rabbits did you chase here? Dawn.
We talked about the request that David made. He was trying to go and say, we were kind to you when we were around you last time, so maybe you could do the same for us this time. And just kind of, treat us like we treated you before they came. I mean, he was trying to be peaceful.
Okay, Dawn says this was a peaceful request. Anybody take it the other way?
Yeah, well, it was a peaceful request, but it was kind of like, okay, you're not gonna give it to me, I'll just take it. I mean, I have a problem with that.
Okay.
Because it's not really a request, you know?
Yeah, was this a request? What do you see in the text that makes you think that one way or the other?
Maybe a little bit manipulative.
Maybe a little manipulative?
Then telling them, look, we could have killed your people and taken it before, so we didn't, so now give it to us.
If you were filming this and there was a desperado, had a band of 600 armed men in the wilderness, and he shows up, how many men does he send?
400.
Right, well, that's when he's going to go kill them all. But he sends 10 soldiers up to say, hey, long life and good health to you. Got something for us? I mean, again, this you could definitely read this, and I think people have read this as like it's a shakedown. Now, I think those of us who know David and know David's heart would apply a different thing to that, which was basically David saying, no, we've taken care of you. This is a festive time. Will you not share with the community of that's out here in the wilderness? We've done for you. Will you please find some ways for us? And you might lean more in the positive direction if you look at the way that the way he makes the request. That he says, if you can just find something for these young men of mine and stuff like that. But Nabal's response, right? Evaluate Nabal's response. What did you talk about that?
He's a jerk.
Okay. Why is he a jerk? What about his response?
Pretending he didn't know who David was.
Pretending he didn't know who David was? Ronald?
Well, David's request was a fair request for what he had actually done for him. And he was very respectful to him. He wasn't demanding, he wasn't dishonorable at all. Whereas Nabal's response to him was the height of disrespect.
Okay.
And a complete misevaluation of where he was in that conversation. He really thought he was a peer or above David in this conversation. And clearly, he was deep down subordinate, so.
Yeah, I mean, the disrespect that he shows David compared to David's respectful request, even if you were going to say no to it, this was not just saying no. And in an honor-shame culture, this was striking, right? What were some of the facets of his response that made it so disrespectful?
Who is this son of Jesse?
Who is this son of Jesse? All Israel knew who this son of Jesse was. Everybody knew, right? Yeah. Jim?
Well, same thing. He didn't just disrespect David. He disrespected David's father.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then he said, many servants are breaking away from their masters. So he's accusing David of breaking away from Saul.
Yes.
Saying, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly the opposite of what had happened, right? David had remained loyal to Saul, still remained loyal to Saul. And he's saying, oh man, a lot of servants are breaking away from their masters. I see you as just a servant who's broken away. Debbie, and then Linda.
Why did David have to ask, was he considered poor or unable to provide?
I think they're living in the wilderness and they're having to live off the land and somebody's land. So, right. So they could have taken those sheep, and this was David's point. He's like, we could have just taken them. Or we could have let other people take them, but we didn't. In fact, we protected your property, so can't you not? And again, the other thing is that it's festival time, it's shearing time, so you got all these workers that are there, so the idea is, of course, there's going to be large amounts of provision. They're going to slaughter animals, which they don't always do. So if there is any time when Nabal would have at disposal the ability to help feed David's group, this would be the time. It was a very reasonable time to ask him, but Nabal's going to be the most unreasonable thing that we can imagine. Let's see what happens. Verse 14. One of the servants told Nabal's wife, Abigail, David sent messengers from the desert to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the field near them, nothing was missing. Night and day they were a wall around us. All the time we were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him. Abigail lost no time. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seah of roasted grain, 100 cakes of raisin, 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, go on ahead, I'll follow you. But she did not tell her husband Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said, it's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the desert so that nothing was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him." When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "My lord, let the blame be on me alone. Please let your servant speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. May my lord pay no attention to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name is Fool, and folly goes with him. But as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my master sent. Now since the Lord has kept my master from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, may your enemies and all who intend to harm my master be like Nabal, and let this gift which your servant has brought to my master be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's offense, for the Lord will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my master, because he fights the Lord's battle." Who is this son of Jesse? Even his wife knew that David was going to be the next king, right? "Let no wrongdoing be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my master will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away from the pocket as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has done for my master every good thing promised concerning him and appointed him leader over Israel, and my master will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord has brought my master success, remember your servant." David said to Abigail, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been alive left by daybreak." Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him and said, "Go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your requests." Okay. Let's maybe discuss these together, because we don't have a ton of time. What do you make of Abigail? What makes her tick? What do her actions show about her? What do you make of her speech to David? What can we learn about taking godly advice from David and Abigail?
I think she kind of knew what was coming, and she wanted to protect the male servants of her household that she maybe had grown to care for, and didn't want any unnecessary bloodshed on, any people who hadn't necessarily done wrong with it.
Okay, good. Yeah. Dawn?
I found it interesting that she had the respect of the servants, that they knew in this relationship that she was the one who was going to do something that would protect them.
Yeah, how about that? Her relationship with her servants and her ability and her actions here. What can we deduce about her? What can we learn about her from that? What do you think?
She wasn't afraid of Nabal, and she would do what she wanted.
Okay, yeah, she was not afraid of Nabal. She was going to do what she wanted. She's an independent lady, for sure.
But wasn't she also serving her husband by doing what he needed, not necessarily what he wanted?
Absolutely. I think she's an excellent example of a spouse who's doing what her husband needed, not what he wanted, even though she knows he's a fool. Right? This could be a different marriage maintenance Bible study than the one over there. What to do when your husband's a fool. Yeah. What else do you learn about Nabal and Abigail and their servants in this? Did that interaction with the servant and Abigail strike you as odd at all?
The servant even said, "He's such a wicked man, no one can talk to him."
Right.
Like, straight to her face.
Straight to her face, to the lady of the house. He says, your husband's such a wicked man, nobody can talk to him. You got to do something. I mean, his wickedness must have been
well known.
Well known. So well known enough that you can talk to the lady of the house about it. Yeah.
Likely a male servant. He knew what his fate was.
Yeah, interesting, yeah. Right? Bob.
Well, and the fact that the servant knew that David had in fact given a service to Nabal. I mean, so Nabal obviously knew.
Nabal knew.
And so he's just greedy and disrespectful.
Nabal, that night, what was he congratulating himself on, you think? When he sat down to get drunk. I saved some food.
Conned a man out of free service.
Conned a man out of free service. Maybe even more than that.
Stood up to who's going to be king, and I'm just as important as you.
Yes, I stood up to that son of Jesse. He probably sat around with his cronies getting drunk and rejoicing over the fact that he'd sent the son of Jesse packing. Yeah, right? It's interesting. How about, what can we learn from David and Abigail about taking and giving godly advice? Ronald.
I hope I'm quoting this correctly. It is better to be young and poor than old and the king who can't take advice.
Yeah. I don't know if you got it exactly right, but it certainly sounds Solomonic, so, yeah. It sounds, yeah, okay, good.
That's what I see between the two. I see David being a young man who really was rescued by Abigail. Really. Abigail not only saved all those people, she saved David.
She did?
All of us.
Go ahead,
I'm
Max.
having trouble following the age of David through this. I mean.
How old is he, you're asking?
How old is David at this stage?
I think we would say in his 20s. We don't know exactly, but probably in his 20s. So he's a young man.
How old was he when he became king?
Oh, I'd have to look that up. I think he was probably around, I think he was still a young man when he became king, but he wasn't not like a teenage king. I'll look that up for you, Max. I don't remember that off the top of my head. It's interestingly enough, do you see a parallel between
Abigail and Jonathan?
Abigail and Jonathan, yeah, right? But the difference is David listened to Abigail's advice. Saul didn't listen to the advice of Jonathan. Even when you think about two possible massacres, isn't this an awful lot like nearly a priest at Nob sort of situation? Right? But there, Saul got advice. He told people to kill the priests, and his men said, we're not killing the priests. This is a bad idea. And he has said, Doeg the Edomite, you foreigner, go kill the priests. He's like, I'll kill the priests. Here, David is saved from the same kind of massacre by the godly advice given by Abigail. Yeah, and it's interesting. You can see her, you see the list of things that she brought. She brought dressed sheep. That means they've already been skinned, and those were for immediate consumption. She also packed dates and raisin cakes. Those were long-term. This is what you can take and keep with you. So she was very generous in what she provided. Her advice to David was godly advice, and David respected it as such and said, "You've kept me from bloodshed today." And that was her word too. You don't put this onto your record. When God makes you king, you don't want to have the record of a massacre just because a man's a fool. Here, take this stuff, right? Yeah. Let's see how it ends. We're at verse 36. When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk, telling people how he'd sent that son of Jesse packing. So she told him nothing until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong, and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his head." Then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, "David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife." She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, "Here's your maidservant, ready to serve you and wash the feet of my master's servants." Abigail quickly got on a donkey and, attended by her 5 maids, went with David's messengers and became his wife. David had also married Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they were both his wives. But David had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Paltiel, son of Laish, who was from Gilead. All right. Did you notice the double meaning of Nabal's affliction? She tells him this, and what does he become like? Does that strike any notes?
Pharaoh's heart.
Well, maybe. I'm actually thinking of something that Abigail said. Oh, go ahead. Abigail said to David.
Kind of struck me as when Lot was running away from Sodom and Gomorrah, and his wife turned back and got turned into a soldier.
Okay. I was going for something even a little more literal, like if you look back at verse 29. Even if someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my master will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. What's in the pocket of a sling? A stone, yeah. And he was an enemy of David, and he heard the news, and he became like a stone, and then the Lord struck him dead. It's interesting that you also see a parallelism here between God is reinforcing for David that the throne that he's going to have, the future that he's going to have, is going to be established by the Lord and not by David's striving, right? Here, Nabal, God's going to take care of his enemy for him. It's the same thing he's going to do with King Saul. He doesn't have to try to kill King Saul because God's made the promise. David will be king, and nothing can stop that. And David's going to show that faith in God and his patience to say, okay, Lord, I commit my cause to your hands. I'm going to let you be my protector, my defender. And God did not disappoint. Well, the last, please, Gary.
Just read ahead a little bit in 2 Samuel 5, David was 30 years old when he became king.
Thank you. I was going to guess 30, but I couldn't remember it exactly. I didn't want to be making stuff up. I try not to do that as very often, or I'll tell you when I'm making stuff up. What do you make all the wifery? Well, David at this point has been married 3 times, right? So he was married to Michal, but King Saul took Michal and gave her to somebody else. Why would he do that?
Spite.
Spite would be one answer, yeah. Another answer, just purely political. Right? That you don't have, if they have children, then that would be a combining of House Saul and House David. The line of Kish would be continued in that child, and if David's fighting for dynastic control, that's a lot of kingdoms have been made by marriages in the history of the world. And Saul was making sure there was no dynastic connection. But the other thing you're going to find out in the Old Testament, you see examples, especially in the Kings, of people being involved with marriages that are way outside of God's plan for marriage. That nowhere does God say in the Old Testament it was good for people to be married to multiple wives, but we see a lot of examples of it. Although every time we see examples of it, they always show us the trouble that comes when you don't follow God's plan for marriage. And that's going to be the beginning here. Please.
Point of clarity, David's new Ahinoam is not Saul's Ahinoam, is it?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
No, because she's of Jezreel.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a different one. That's my understanding anyway, but I'll double check on that too. Yeah, that's a good question, but I think because of Jezreel, she's not.
That would be quite a coup.
Yeah, it would. Yes, exactly. No, I'll double check, but I don't think so. Yeah. Jamie Grace.
Getting started on the harem early.
He is. He's getting started in the harem early. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, when you see multiple wives in the Old Testament, it always is shown with an example of why it was not a good idea. It's never shown as an example of this is what you should do. Any other questions about David and Abigail? Thank you very much. We'll talk to you next week.
It's more political power by marrying her than basically inherited all his wealth. It's position, it's politics.
You'd have to get inside it to get this part. Really clever people. Really use
That's why I should
We'll see you.